There are becoming a lot more straight males that actually do drag performances, and not just one performance, but actually have become full-on drag queens.
Right. I would love for it to get to a place where it's just treated as an art form, that people want to pursue this art. It's a field of the arts.
Yeah.
It's legitimate. There should be a space for family-friendly queer theater. It's doable. It's not done enough, and it needs to, and it does have to be done with a certain amount of finesse. But there is definitely a space for kids, straight, queer, otherwise, to enjoy family-friendly queer theater. When we did Alice in DerbyLand this past spring, we did it at Paristown, so it was in the outdoor theater. It was all ages, and it just tugged this old man's heartstrings so much to see all these kids at the show dancing in front of the stage, going up to the drag queens and just in love with what they were seeing and dancing. And I'm like, this is amazing. And if that little girl says, "Mommy, I want to be a drag queen because I really like that drag queen," or that little boy, or who, that Drag Daddy Productions could be a influence to a young person's queer journey.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's inspirational, and I don't think it'll be long before you start getting some of the little notes and stuff from, kids out there that are seeing some of these shows at places like Paristown and stuff, and they'll start writing to you and talking about how you've influenced them. We've been in this for 6 months, and it's been incredible, just like some of the random notes we'll get from rural kids that this is all they've got. They can listen to a podcast because their parents can't figure it out, So that's the one good thing about a podcast is most parents won't even know how to get on one.
Right.
So.
Totally.
Howdy, y'all. I'm Kurtis Sunset.
And I'm Leah Halston. And this is Weathering Rainbows.
We are back with another. Did you hear my jaw just pop? Ow! Jeez.
You was really feeling that back, honey.
Whew, I better practice my jaw moving before this weekend.
Right.
All right, let's try that again.
Okay.
A blooper reel. We know that a lot of people are with their families and maybe needing this little distractor. Yeah. I know some of us occasionally need that distraction,
or just away from the family,
or something. You feel like
driving.
You're going into turkey coma. You just need that to relax.
Or driving and want something subtle to listen to.
Exactly.
To keep you woke.
Mm-hmm. And they might fall asleep to our nice, beautiful voices. I don't know. so maybe they should only listen to the fun parts whenever they're driving.
Right.
So today we wanted to bring a fun story, not from this past week or month, but we wanted to bring a fun story from our first relationships. So this should be an interesting one.
Yes.
So I'll start out this one and tell you all how I got my first boyfriend.
Here we go.
So my first boyfriend was actually in my fraternity, which was a little awkward in general. Whenever you're in undergrad, you hang out a lot with fraternity guys and the people you're around. And I thought this person was really attractive, and I was like, getting some vibes. We've all got our little gaydars, but you never really know until, a triggering event happens that tells you. So the way my first boyfriend came about was I was really sick, like had a head cold and everything. Was really sick, and I had taken some some meds, some of the, liquid meds. But it also just happened to be a night like everybody was out of school and wanting to have a good time.
Yeah.
So there was a little party. And so I was not feeling well, but I took the meds because in undergrad, you just keep going. You don't stop even if you get sick.
Yeah.
So we had a little party at our house, and I was drinking at that time. And these were meds that you shouldn't drink on.
Mm.
So this guy had been texting me off and on for a little bit, and I ended up texting him very incoherently. So because on the meds plus the alcohol, and I told him in the text that I had just stolen a puppy. And that's what like started this conversation. I had just stolen a puppy. For the record, I never stole a puppy. I don't even know why I sent that text. But I was just really messed up on these meds. And I told him I stole a puppy. And then he's like, well, where'd you find the puppy? And I was like, in a trash can. Like, it was bad. These meds were really tearing me up. But in those texts, I apparently just flat out asked if he was gay. And like, we had a grand conversation about it. So like the next day I wake up and I'm reading all these texts and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was both terrified because I had said all these incoherent things, but then also like really excited because I knew this person was gay. And so that's how the conversation started that landed me my first boyfriend, which I dated for probably 2.5 years. We had a lot of firsts together, coming out and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's pretty awesome. So my story is a little bit different. My story is my first boyfriend here when I first moved to Louisville to take the job that I got with Play. So moving here in 2012, my first boyfriend, we met on Grindr. And of course, he met Tony and not Leah. So we talked for a while, went on dates, never knew about Leah. So on nights that I had to work at the show, he would be like, why you work so late? And I'm like, well, that's just my schedule. I don't know what lie I told. I don't know if I didn't know. I said I worked at the bar, but I said I was a bartender. So long story short, fast forward, and he shows up at the bar one night. And I'm like on stage doing my thing, blah, blah, blah. We get back home. And he's over to my house. And I'm like showered and, stuff. And so he's like, I said, what'd you do tonight? And he was like, well, I popped up at the bar and I didn't see you. And I said, I probably was there. I was like working about, I don't know what I told him or something like that. And he went on to say, but the Leah person, I really like her. Like she was amazing. I ended up saying, did you like the show? He was like, yeah. He said, but the Leah person was my favorite. She's funny on the mic and blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, oh God, I just thought that was really funny. And after a few weeks or days, I finally told him that was me, and he like flipped out, and he loved it. He loved being in a relationship with somebody as popular as I was. So I thought that was pretty funny. And I said, what did you do? He said, I just walked around and I watched the show, and he was like, but that Leah person had me cracking up. And I was like, oh my God, you didn't put two and two together that was me.
That is awesome.
I thought that was pretty funny. We dated for about a year. And things just didn't work out.
Right.
And I just felt bad. I felt bad because I was lying, and I was like, I can't lie anymore. So I was like, I have to tell this person who I am.
Yeah.
And he took it. He took it really well.
I can't imagine that kind of thing happening. Like just walking in and
Like, I feel like
not
my
being able to
voice is
see,
the
like-
same. And, you know, I don't know. I guess my makeup was really good that night and he couldn't tell.
Hey, I'll tell you this. Today, someone asked me who the new lesbian host on my show was. Because they thought natural born female is what they were assuming. So,
oh my God. Well, thank you. That's a compliment. Shimmy, shimmy, shimmy.
Right. So, and I was like, well, she likes men. So, and they're like, I thought you were an LGBTQ show. And I was like, yeah. But I didn't go into it. So.
She is a man.
Yeah. I did not go into it. So
I'm surprised. Like, I've been so self-conscious about my voice. I'm like, man, I'm sure they know this voice is really deep.
Hey, I had somebody from Seattle the other day message and go, I love that, like, lady's nice scratchy voice. They're like, you got to keep her.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you, Seattle.
That's
so sweet.
Anyway, so that's some good first boyfriend story. You know, your first in Louisville and my first. You'll like this. So my first boyfriend ever. It seems like I always get like strange names for boyfriends. I don't seek them out. But I'll go ahead and tell it. I don't care.
Yeah.
So, you know Frodo from Lord of the Rings?
Yes.
So my boyfriend at that time's name was Elijah Wood.
Oh, God.
So this is like my first boyfriend, and everybody's always like, what's their name? And I tell them, and they're like, you're dating Frodo?
Yeah. So. My first boyfriend, I wish people could have seen, honestly, I'm going to tell y'all this. My first boyfriend could have been a stunt double for Will Smith.
Oh, wow.
He looked just, and I'm convinced that it was Will Smith. You can't tell me that it wasn't. I honestly think my first boyfriend was Will Smith. Like, I was in high school and he was in college, and I used to tell my mom, I'm like, this is my best friend. Like, this is my friend in school. Like, this boy was in college. It was so funny because, like, his parents are divorcing, so he's gonna stay a couple of nights with us.
Oh, the excuses. Yeah.
Oh, I know, but no, he looked just like Will Smith, and he never wanted me to go to the clubs. And then when I found out about the clubs, when I found out where the clubs were, because I was like in 11th grade, or maybe I was in 10th grade. I don't know. Well, when I found out where the clubs were is when I first saw my drag show. But when I found out where the clubs were, and that's when I found him, and come to find out he had like 8 other boyfriends.
Oh, wow. I think we might need to reach out to Red Table Talk show, and maybe we need to be on there and come to figure out if this really was Will Smith or not.
Right. I'm really no, you can't tell me. I'm so convinced that it was him. At least that's what I'm gonna keep thinking. Leah dated Will Smith.
Oh, man. First boyfriends,
Yes.
I'm very thankful. Obviously a lot of times your first boyfriends don't work out, so it's not something to be ashamed of or anything.
Yeah.
But you learn a lot, and you're always going to have love for that first one. Just for the things that you went through with them. Let's jump into our get to know you questions.
Yay! My favorite segment.
Do you have any recurring dreams? And if so, tell us.
That's a really good question. And on a serious note, my recurring dream is really serious. As you all know, I used to be a flight attendant for Delta for about 10 or 9 years. In 2012, I decided to retire, not because they merged with the Northwest, and I was based in Cincinnati, and they were trying to move me to JFK. So I just went on and took a servant's package and quit, because not only did I not want to live in New York, but prior, like a couple of years before the merge, I started having these nightmares about a plane crashing with me on it. And I would get up and walk away from the plane crash. So honestly, I am still having there are two dreams that I'm having, and I kind of don't want to look up the meaning of them because I don't believe, I kind of just don't want to know. I'm still having dreams about the plane crashing. And it's not just that one plane, it's several different scenarios that'll happen. I could be at an airport in my dream and I'll watch the plane go up and it'll just crash into the ground. It's not funny. But
wow.
Or either I'm on the plane and then we crash and then I get up and start running and helping people. So I don't know what the meaning is. I want to know that. The other dream that I keep having is tornadoes, which is like weird because like I could just be like in the dream just sitting there and then all of a sudden like 6 or 7 tornadoes will come. And like those are my recurring dreams like I'm having is either with a plane crash or tornadoes.
Wow.
And I'm like, why can't this be sex? Like, why can't this be like Ryan Reynolds,
We ain't talking about wet dreams yet on the show.
I mean, I would love that to be like, let me dream about Ryan Reynolds every night. I would love that.
I have a dream book, so I'm going to go look up these things, and we will let our listeners know what you are dealing with your dreams
and then
next week.
I can face it now. Like, at first I didn't want to face it because I'm like, I'm from New Orleans. I believe in a lot of stuff. So, and, my grandparents have all these superstitions and stuff like that. So, I think I can face it now. So yeah, look them up and then we'll talk about it.
All right.
All right. My question for you is, if you choose to get married one day, what would your dream proposal scenario be?
Oh, wow. I've already thought about this because I'm super romantic.
That's why I said this is a good question.
So I have and if I'm ever start dating anybody, they can't listen to this episode because I'm going to tell how I would propose. So obviously I'm from the country and I like country things. So like I would make sure to plan it like around like when lightning bugs are out.
Yeah.
And I think what I would want to do, I've always had this like vision of like being alone and catching all these lightning bugs and having them like around and in jars and stuff, where they can still live and breathe. Don't think I'm going to kill all these lightning bugs, but and like having them like line a truck bed and like just go out and stargaze and that sort of thing, that very like romantic gesture, like a night just under the stars, and finally propose to the person who I would actually want to spend the rest of my life with. So that's kind of where I would be. Obviously there'd be a lot more planning with it, but the grand vision is something to do with like lightning bugs and stars and I just love those things about the country.
I went to a outside wedding this past summer, and for one, it was hot. It was beautiful. It was a Harry Potter theme. It was beautiful, and then the sounds of the insects it was by a lake, and it was just beautiful. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just worried about spiders and bugs.
Yeah, I would definitely I love barn weddings. That's just like the big thing around here. I think they're just so beautiful, just being outdoors.
Yeah.
So,
that's beautiful.
All right. So with that, we are going to kick it over to the interview. Howdy, everybody. Today we have a great guest with us. We have Tony Lewis, and I am going to ask Tony to introduce himself to you all and tell us a little bit about what he does.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kurtis. Yeah, my name's Tony Lewis. I run a local theater company in Louisville, Kentucky called Drag Daddy Productions. And kind of our mission is we really try to bring together the worlds of drag and theater, because there's a lot of queens who come from the theater world who want to get back to some of their roots in that way. And then there's also a lot of queens who don't have that experience and really want it because they want to be more theatrical, or they have bigger aspirations where they think they might need more acting experience under their belt. So it's a really exciting and different world of theater, and to kind of create from. So I'm really excited to be. The company's just about 2 years old, and one of those years was that year we don't talk about anymore. We're really trying to have a nice, ambitious kind of first season in 2021.
So where did the name Drag Daddy come from? Who thought that one up?
Sure. So so I was doing a few shows at Play Louisville, which is where Drag Daddy does a lot of their productions. And the one of the owners came up to me and he's like, Tony, you need to like brand your shows because you don't put like a company behind it, so people don't know like exactly what it is. He's like, you should do Tony Lewis Presents. I was like, I'm never going to put Tony Lewis Presents on anything. That's just is like not my gig. But over the, I want to say 17 or so year career I've had working with drag queens in Chicago and now in Louisville, it's been amazing to work with some young talent and watch them like flourish over the years. And I have always felt like a proud dad to like know that this actor who was in my show in 2008 is now a thriving drag queen in Chicago. So I've always felt this kind of, paternal kind of dad role. So when it came to figuring out a good name for the company, I thought Drag Daddy would be a good option. And it's still, brands, I think it brands well what we do. It keeps it a little sexy, a little fun, a little intriguing. It kind of came to me. I saw a hat in a store that said Drag Dad, and I was like, oh, but I'm Drag Daddy,
I love it. That's a great name and very catchy. What shows have you all produced, and what shows are you planning on producing in the future?
Yeah, sure. So we, our first shows we did were 2 productions of Snow White and the 7 Drag Queens, which we did in late 2019. And then we had a whole bevy of shows planned for 2020, and all of them got canceled. So coming out of that, we did original show I wrote called Alice in DerbyLand, which follows the story of Alice, except now she's tumbling down a rabbit hole into Louisville, Kentucky on the most exciting weekend of the year here in Kentucky. And she meets all the same cast of characters. There's the Delta Queen as opposed to the Queen of Hearts, and she's on her path to become the Belle of Louisville. So the Kentucky puns and references in this show, they are in abundance. They never end.
Right.
So that was a really fun show, which we're hoping to make an annual thing. That we did our first one just in April this year. So we're hoping to bring that back next spring.
And you said you wrote that show?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay.
All the script I wrote, and then all of the lyrics are rewritten pop songs. So I for example, the opening number was Miley Cyrus's "Party in the USA," except we sang "Party in the Bluegrass State." So there's just a lot of that's basically kind of been what I've really like. The majority of the shows I've worked on and written over the years have been me turning a story on its head and then turning lyrics to songs that people know on their head, and then people just have always seemed to really warm up to that format. So I keep doing it. And then we actually did in June. I was feeling this really great momentum from Alice in DerbyLand. So I was like, oh, we should do a Pride show. So we did this like musical review called Heroes at Play. And it was this really cool project that at first I was just like, oh, I'm going to do a Pride cabaret kind of thing, and we'll incorporate some superhero vibes into it because that's so, on brand right now with what's going on with, Marvel and everything. So it actually turned into this really cool project. There were 6 performers, and each of them kind of told me about who were their big inspirations when they were coming out and becoming adult queer people, and also who were their favorite superheroes as kids or as adults. And we found all this really cool material to tell their stories of being their own heroes and the heroes that led them to be those queer heroes for people now. So it actually turned into this really cool show that I'm hoping we actually do that again next year too. And it really caught on. Like we only did it 2 nights, but both nights we had like packed houses, and I thought it was going to be like, oh, we're going to do this little, review and some people show up. And then it was a really, really great success. And then we went on to do Snow White and the Seven Drag Queens. We brought it back just a few weeks ago in October, and we're also doing that again in December, which is our holiday version. So if you have already seen the show, we do have a bunch of new Christmas songs and all sorts of different holiday mentions and stuff. So that's December 18th, not to put my shameless plug in too soon.
No, go ahead.
And so been working in the community too. We also produced all of the entertainment for a Halloween festival called Halloween, which was presented by Drag Queen Storytime down at Turner Circus. Which was a really exciting weekend. Dusty Ray Bottoms was the co-host and MC, and Dusty is actually from Louisville, moved to New York, went on Drag Race, and then during COVID came back. So I've just been thrilled to work with Dusty since he moved back. He's in Snow White as well, but it was great to work with him on Halloween. And then after all those years of doing all that more parody rewrites of stuff, I really wanted to work on one of my favorite musicals like ever. I love the music and the story so much since I was a very young queer person. Like since I was like 16, 17, like that's when that movie first came out. And it was just like, wow, this is like something totally different. I've been working since I moved back to Louisville in 2018. I've been working with Gilda Wabbit, who is just a phenom performer here in Louisville and willing to really like dig into the deep work of acting and theater production. She comes from a theater degree and an opera degree. So I knew that like this project was definitely, if I was ever going to direct it, this is the person I wanted to work on it with.
Right.
And like it's just, the amount of professionalism and work ethic. I mean, it's such a challenging show. I don't know how well you know it, Kurtis, but like Hedwig speaks the whole show aside from a few other random lines thrown in. So it's like an hour and a half of one performer. And I mean, rehearsals have been going really, really well. So yeah, that opens December 2nd and goes 4 nights only. So it'll be Thursday through Sunday, 7:30 p.m. and tickets at playlouisville.com. So
December 2nd through the 5th. And that is this upcoming weekend. Phenomenal performer, Gilda Wabbit. I mean, you can't get much better than that for this type of show. So how can people get involved? And I think another important question that viewers might want to know is this only for drag queens?
Sure. So as far as how people can get involved, we're a newer company. We're definitely building a cohort to like really try to make this a transformative group here in Louisville and do something different. We have definitely opportunities for performers, but there's definitely, I want Drag Daddy to be a big influence in the community and also, as far as volunteer opportunities and whatnot. So there's definitely, if you guys, anybody was interested in working with Drag Daddy, you can just message us on Facebook Messenger or on Instagram. And we, even if you're like, hey, I just want to help paint sets maybe or do something, like there's definitely like, we are not turning down anybody who wants to help and make this, queer experiment here in Louisville grow. A lot of the shows are featuring drag queens, of course. That's what a lot of the content is based around. But even like this last show we did, Snow White and the Seven Drag Queens, we cast our first AFAB queen as one of the 7. So it was, and she actually is a female actress who we kind of molded into a little drag queen. So it's actually pretty exciting to give a lot of people their first time in heels and doing that whole drag makeup experience. But yeah, like our Snow White has a prince character and there's definitely a lot of room at the table for non-drag roles, but definitely it's all pretty queer focused content.
Have you ever done drag?
Oh yeah. So, the first time I ever did drag, so Snow White and the Seven Drag Queens, I first produced it in 2009 in Chicago. And we had our final dress rehearsal, which it was an invited press dress rehearsal. One of the queens playing Dopey decided to not show up to rehearsal. So I was the only one because I wrote it, so I was the only one who knew all the lines. And so I ran down in the basement of Hydrate Nightclub in Chicago where we were doing the show, and we had just some bins of costumes. And I find like a skirt, the ugliest like black bob wig possible in this little shirt because I like literally there was like we just had to we had to start the show. I like shave over a sink without shaving cream, just using water and like a dull razor, throw a bunch of makeup on my face, and then I was like, oh, I have to make a character decision. So I was like, oh, I'll just do a really deep voice because that's funny. So like I created this character of Dopey in the show and then ended up playing it for like a year because the show kept getting extended and I was enjoying it at that point. And then I actually for a little bit I did like I won the pageant at Roscoe's once, so I do have that notch under my belt. Yes, and my drag name is it was Skippy Van Bibber. And
love it.
Skippy was my first dog ever, and Van Bibber was my grandmother's maiden name. So that's the little formula I used. But now over the years, because I would say I was kind of more of a twink in in those times of my life, and now I've gotten much more of a dad bod. So I call myself Beefy Van Bibber instead. So she's gone from Skippy to Beefy.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great drag name. How would they contact you or get in touch with you that they want to help with the show?
So they could email dragdaddyoffice@gmail.com. That's all one word. They could also message us on Facebook Messenger or on Instagram Messenger. I'm kind of checking all those all the time. So any way they'd want to reach out to us, they could also, if you want to message me directly on Facebook Messenger, it's just my name, Tony Lewis. If you find Drag Daddy, you should find me pretty easily. So yeah, I'm very accessible. So definitely if anybody wants to shoot me an email, something on Messenger, and hopefully there'd be a good fit for something that you might want to help with future productions.
So I want to get into talking a little bit about your LGBTQ influencers. Obviously, if you're in theater, you've got to have some major influences in your life when it comes to this. So who are yours and why are they your influencers?
Sure. I think some very like queer coded cinema I watched as a kid was all the John Waters films. Hairspray, Cry Baby, all the Divine movies, and I knew there was something like, I didn't even know what camp was at the time, but I knew I was just like, so intrigued by this form of comedy and over the topness. And like, that was definitely my first introduction to camp. And then, Harvey Fierstein was also like, when Hairspray grew into its own thing, a decade or so later, to see him in that queer iconic role. I just remember being like, that's such a cool role, especially because he was the brother in Birdcage, and in Mrs. Doubtfire, he was so it was like one of those things. I didn't even realize that was the same person for many years because he was just the gay brother in Mrs. Doubtfire. So he was always a big inspiration. And then definitely like the Birdcage and Nathan Lane, like those iconic queer movies that were just like some of the first characters that I started to see not being portrayed as a victim, but being portrayed as a hero, as a person of power, as a person who's hilarious. And like, that's when I started like, that's the kind of person, the queer person I want to strive to be, is someone who's living a happy, fun life and dealing with all the stuff that's thrown at them from day to day. And then I'd say the biggest thing that kind of shaped my, like as far as inspirations was musical theater, and specifically Rent and Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Like Rent, I was like 15 when it came out, and I got that soundtrack, and I connected to it so passionately. And there was just, even though, the main story is about two straight guys, but it was one of the first things where you see queer representation with Angel and with Collins and a lot of the other, and Joanne and Maureen, like just to see these queer people living in New York City. And like, it was just such an exciting thing that was so far away from my reality, but it inspired me to want to like really strive to get to that kind of place one day. And then when Hedwig came out, like Stephen Trask and Jonathan Cameron Mitchell, those men, that piece of theater they created, it's just so unique, so transformative, but so unabashedly queer. And that's like, you know, a lot of what we're talking about is don't be afraid to be, you know, unabashedly yourself and queer, and no apologies. You know, as RuPaul says, if they ain't paying your bills, pay them bitches, no mine. So, you know,
absolutely.
So I think to see like iconic characters who weren't victims was really inspiring me to get me to a place where I could be proud.
You mentioned a lot of great influences on that, and just some updated things on some of those. I saw where like Nina West is about to be in Hairspray, go on tour with them. So that's a exciting development. And then Rent, have you seen the new like biographical about him? I believe it's just released on Netflix.
Tick, 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 boom.
Yeah. But yeah, so there's a few things with those influences and how that kind of even comes back, you know, today and keeps reappearing with those influencers. Let's kind of go back a little bit and tell a little bit about your personal story, kind of coming to Louisville and getting all of this started. So first off, how did you come out, and what age were you that you kind of like started to accept yourself?
I mean, I think I knew I was queer without knowing I was queer from a very young age. And I was a very early bloomer as far as development and getting tapped into sexuality. And so when I was in high school, this isn't a thing anymore, but back in the day in like the 90s, the queer high school kids would cruise around Cherokee Park, and like there was these cute little spots you'd park and everyone would like get out and flirt. So that's like how I first started to get to know like queer culture, was like park cruising. Because, you know, that's how you did it in the 90s. And so then I was, you know, just kind of like, I went to St. X, and I was very much someone who just flew under the radar. I played football my freshman year, and which kind of gave me a pass with a lot of guys. And like, I was totally like on the DL. And, you know, I look back at some of like my queer friends who were much more unabashedly themselves in high school. And I'm just like, think about how much bravery that took, especially like in the 90s, you know, like, and I flew under the radar and got through it. And we all have our own tactics to survive high school, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But then I moved to Chicago when I was 19. I went to Roosevelt University at the Chicago College of Performing Arts, and I met a guy, and I came home for Christmas, and I was excited, nervous to maybe tell my parents, hey, I met a guy, which means I'm gay. So my aunt had been dating this dude for like ever, and like all of her brothers would give him so much shit for, and they were just like not kind to him. And in my mind, I was just like, wow, if that's how they treat like the aunt's straight boyfriend, how are they going to treat my, you know, queer boyfriend when I bring him home one day? And so like, it was great timing, because, you know, the perfect time to come out to your parents is Christmas Eve. So it's Christmas Eve, and they can see I'm just huffing and puffing after I saw them like treat my aunt's BF not too great. And they're like, what's wrong with you? I was like, well, I don't understand. Like, we're family. And if someone brings someone to the table and that person treats your loved one well, there shouldn't be this, you know, BS that you don't just respect that as face value and love that person because your loved one loves that person. And then I went into, because there's someone in my life who I would like to bring around, and I don't think that you guys would like to meet them. And I don't know if I was that gentle with pronouns at the time, but I was definitely trying not to, like, you know, dance around it. And my mom said, no, I'm sorry. My dad said, "Are you gay?" And I said, "Yes." And my mom said, "I knew you were." And so it was a moment. And then my dad said, "Why would you choose to do that?" And then I asked my dad, "Well, could you choose to have sex with a man?" And he said, "No, I would never choose that." And I said, "Well, no, I didn't ask if you would choose." I said, "Could you choose that?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, why would me as your son, who you've raised in, you know, this Catholic environment, which, you know, well, we don't need to go down that road. But why would you know, me as your son who you've raised, why would I be any different than not to be able to make that, you know, why would I be able to make this radical choice when it's obviously not a choice?" So it's been a journey. Mom's always been great. Sister's been, you know, so loving. She actually came out to her when I was 16, and she kept that to herself for 3 years until I decided to come out to my parents. So,
wow.
Yeah. And she did ask at one point a couple of years in, she's like, so you're still gay? I was like, yes, it's not going away. And not that she wanted it to. She was just like doing like, I'm just checking in, that's still your thing. I'm like, yep. So yeah, and it's been a whole series of, different journeys with my extended family. That same, or the next year, I wanted to bring boyfriend home for Christmas, and my parents, or my dad, not my parent, my dad had said, he can't sleep here. And I was like, well, if I'm not going to be welcome, then I'm not coming home for Christmas. And then my aunt Sally, I'll call her out by name. She called me and she's like, hey, I heard you're not coming home for Christmas. And I said, yep, I'm not coming home because I can't stay at my own parents' house. And they're like, nope, you're not staying at your parents' house. You're staying at my house. And so my aunt was just like, no, you're coming home, and, don't let ignorance of anyone else keep you away from your family. So I did, and I was very glad. And she did make us sleep in separate bedrooms. She's like, it's not because you're gay. I would make my son if he brought his girlfriend home. I was like, okay, Aunt Sally, you got it.
So your mom was pretty accepting right off the bat, and your dad kind of struggled through the religiousness of the area.
It was more the Rush Limbaugh-ness of the area. He was never that religious. It was just, yeah.
I don't know if that's probably a little worse.
Because because there wasn't like, I was like, is it because you think I'm going to hell? It was just like, I don't like it.
So have either of them ever been to one of your shows?
Yes. So, all that being said, mom comes to every show, dad comes to every show he can. We may not agree on a lot of things politically, but there's definitely a mutual love and respect because, I just had to, there's no perfect relationship in the world, and you have to make certain concessions and, and certain compromises with yourself and with others to be like, okay, well, if I want to have this person in my life and I want to prioritize that, I have to accept certain things that will never change. So they're both definitely really big cheerleaders. Dad doesn't like the super queer stuff, but he always comes and has a good time. So, and I guess then he does, because all my stuff's pretty super queer, if I can be honest.
Well, that's great. I mean, that they're both willing to come out and support like that now. So I think that speaks highly of your dad to just be able to come out and support, even, having that in his background, so that's great. So growing up, did you have any like preconceived ideas about like what the gay lifestyle was or gay community was going to be like?
I think like I had seen a couple episodes of Queer as Folk, and it was either I thought I was going to have this like super crazy sexual slutty life, or I was going to die of AIDS, or probably both. Like that was, as a 15, 16-year-old in the mid 90s, like my only real exposure to, this was pre Will and Grace. This was, this was even pre Queer as Folk at the time, I believe. So like the only representations I'd seen of queer culture on screen or anything was like, and the band played on, or everything was either painting a very dubious, sexual, maybe predator even ideal, or it was that you're going to die alone of AIDS. So that was truly like my fear, and I definitely, like when I was in my teens, I was like, I don't know if I'll live to be 25, like it was just, there was such an unknown as far as, it was pre-prep, it was still in days of like figuring out cocktails and stuff, as opposed to this one pill a day reality that HIV patients live with now. And we say living with HIV now. No one was using that terminology in the mid 90s. It was very much different. So yeah, it was definitely a very like, I had to, and also I think like finding sexuality in that era too was, like I said, it was like park cruising. It wasn't I'm taking my boyfriend to the homecoming dance and we both became prom king. Like that was not ever going to happen, especially not in Louisville, Kentucky in 1990, 8 or whatever, you know?
That's one of the main reasons that, you know, like we started this show was to also kind of explain like how media has progressed over time to be more visible with the LGBTQ culture, as well as, I mean, it's like you said, back then it was all kind of a negative representation of, you know, HIV, AIDS. You know, you didn't have a lot of people that looked at it, you know, and said, you know, I can survive. Like, you know, now it's totally different whenever you see people with HIV, AIDS on screen. I think that's a really neat point, is to kind of show that progression. Real quick, fun little comment. Which was your favorite character in Queer as Folk?
I always like wanted to be Brian Kenny because, like, you know,
Right.
like, he had the cool apartment. He slept with all the hot boys. I was probably Michael's the best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Novotny, right? Oh, it's coming back. It's all coming back. Michael
There
Novotny.
you go.
Yeah.
See,
It's in there somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to
yeah.
be Brian. I was probably more of a Michael in reality because I'm
Yeah.
a much nicer person than Brian Kinney ever was. But I wanted to be that like
True.
ruthless sexual person. What about you? Who was your favorite?
Brian Kinney was probably my favorite character for sure, because I always liked the quote. Basically, Brian Kinney was like, "Well, fuck what they think. They're getting me right now." So,
Right.
like that was my favorite quote from that show.
It's true, and I think like what's cool about shows like that is like I think there are parts of me that like are like that aspect of Brian. You know what I mean? That bravery of Brian. And then there's definitely parts of me that are not anymore, but at the time like more reserved like Michael and afraid about what other people are going to think about my choices and my actions and not focused on what makes me happy, you know, which is his big problem the whole show, you know.
The reason I asked, that was actually one of the shows that I kind of like first got inundated with gay culture, you know, so that was one of the first shows that I actually watched and kind of learned gay terms and stuff like that from. So kind of going on that topic, you had some preconceived notions, you've had the media portrayal. What now do you like about the LGBTQ community, and what things do you think could be changed to bring it all closer together?
So I guess I'll do a quick little story to kind of segue. So in 2015, I was on a beach vacation, June of 2015, with like a bunch of aunts and uncles. And my uncle looks at me and he goes, "Tony, when is this whole gay thing gonna like stop? You know, like it's all, you guys are so like, it's out there all the time. Like, when are you going to be satisfied?" And I said, "Well, when we have nationally recognized marriage rights, that'll get me somewhat satisfied, and then we'll start to fight for transgender rights." And my uncle looks at me, he's like, "Tony, that will never happen. There's never going to be gay marriage across the land." 4 days later, I'm still on the same vacation with family, and the Supreme Court made that really amazing decision in late June. So it was kind of funny, and that's kind of my segue is like, we, you know, as a white cisgender male in the gay world, there are certain privileges that are just afforded to me in abundance that are not afforded to other members of queer culture, especially queer culture of color, especially trans people of color. So I think that it's been really cool to see in my progression as a gay man, as an adult gay man in the past 20 years, that there was definitely, and maybe it was just the people I was hanging out with in my early 20s and I found better friends, but there was definitely this feeling that like there was separation, and like there was the, you know, white chiseled gays who go to these bars, and then there was these you know, more freakier people who go to this bar, and then there was the people of color, and like and this was in Chicago, which is a very segregated city. It's like built that way, but it's been really cool to see that, you know, people embracing femininity in really cool ways. People who, you know, who might have a mustache and like to work out all the time, but they prefer they, them pronouns, and everyone respecting that that's what they want to be called. And what your opinion of it doesn't matter, because that's not what they're not asking your opinion. They're asking you to respect what they want to be called. So I think it's been really cool to see the queer the LGBT, and I just say queer for like, I love reclaiming that word so much. And I love how it embraces that whole acronym. Like, you know, we are all this one thing, whether we're all very different, and we need to respect those differences and build each other up, knowing the deficits and attributes other people have. But I think it's just cool to, like, you know, start just being this unified group of people who want the best for everyone else in that group of people, as opposed to, like I said, you know, in my earlier 20s, I definitely saw a much more separation and people being afraid of drag and people being afraid of looking too queer or sounding too queer or wearing stuff like, and I feel like I've seen that happen with people in my generation, but then more so amazingly and abundantly, I've seen it in this next new generation who just doesn't give a shit about, you know, what someone is telling them they're supposed to be. Because it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I stopped giving a crap about what I was supposed to be or this goal I was supposed to achieve. So it's great that kids today, they can, from the, you know, time they're 9 or 10 years old, they can see a queer character on TV, and it's not a person dying of AIDS. It's a person living their best, most fabulous life, and that they can identify something in that about themselves and start that journey much sooner. You know, my husband, he didn't come out until he was 27 years old. And like he, you know, he definitely like tells me like, I feel like I missed a chunk of being the person I actually am because I was trying to live in this thing that the world wanted me to be. My parents wanted me to be. My coworkers wanted me to be. So that's definitely what I think is truly transformative and great about queer culture. And as far as any like deficits, I mean, I think it's mainly people being a bit too selfish with what they want the queer culture to be, or that we should move into some sort of heteronormative ideals because we've gained this equality, as opposed to just still being abundantly ourselves. You know, we got here because we were abundantly ourselves, and because we got to this place of rights doesn't mean that we now like try to, you know, get pigeonholed by some expectations of what we're supposed to be. So I guess it's just the people who are still stuck 20 years ago who need to catch up and realize that there's room for everyone and needs to be room for everyone, because that's the only way we'll truly be a diverse and equitable cohort of people to, you know, to lead a new generation of queer people. So,
yeah. And it's important to note that we are coming to people from Kentucky, you know, where Mark Twain says if he was going to die, he wants to die in Kentucky because everything happens 20 years later. So we do still have a lot of those, I guess, backwoods beliefs, you know, for sure. So I think you'd be a great person to have this conversation with, because you kind of touched on a theme here of, I believe it was your uncle that you were on vacation with that said, you know, you'll never get marriage equality, those kind of things. And when will it stop? When will it, you know, because, you know, people do believe in the gay agenda. They believe that it's a takeover type of situation. And one of the things, like I'm in media, you're in media, theater type of work. And today we do have a lot more visibility in every single show. We have become very much, I feel like, a token place in a lot of TV shows and entertainment on Netflix. Where do you see like media and entertainment going in the future for queer people whenever there is so much out there? There's always a gay person in every Netflix show now. Do you think that that's an accurate portrayal, or do you think that it's something like an overstriving of visibility?
Representation is crucial. You know, there can't be enough of it, in my opinion, because I guess so one time somebody asked Ruth Bader Ginsburg, how many women do you think should be on the Supreme Court? And she said, well, 9. And they were like, 9? Why would you put 9 women? And she said, well, there's been 9 men on it the entire time. So why would it be so obscene to say that 9 women should do the same job? And I think that's kind of a cool metaphor for queer culture. Call it the gay agenda, call it whatever you want, mainstream media, but it's representation. And it's representation that's been lacking, especially in a positive light, since, television existed. So
right.
I think that I think you can run into tokenism with it. I mean, I think it's kind of inevitable. Part of that is just because there's some bad writers out there. But
right.
but I think that the representation is great. I think that there is definitely, if we're talking about the overall arc of equality becoming equitable to all people in the LGBTQI community, I think you're still not seeing. There's been some outliers, like Pose, amazing representation
right.
of the trans and Black community, but that's like an outlier. That you don't see a lot of hugely positive trans, representation. So I think and that's kind of like speaks to I think a lot of gay men feel like, oh, well, we did it. We're satisfied. We're represented on TV. I see a gay guy in every show I watch now. I'm like, yeah, but do you see a trans woman? Do you see a trans man? Mm-hmm. Do you see an intersex person? Do you know what that means? So
right.
There's definitely, that's where I think we have to try to split away from tokenism. But that also, I think, takes time with, having people in the right, the people who make the decisions on who is represented on those shows. You have to get to the point where we are represented, not just on the TV programs, but on the people making the TV programs and on the people making those decisions on what kind of queer representation those shows should have, So, I think it's definitely, representation is huge. And now it's just time to do the harder work and make sure that it's all a bit more equitable.
One of the things that I think is kind of still missing in terms of LGBTQ media is the honest Southern gay story. And that's a lot of the reason why we started producing this show was it's not all as bad as media portrays it to be too. If you look at most of the Southern gay stories, it's all the horrible coming out stories to Christian families, and it's like everybody's going to have this horrible, coming out, and have a horrible life after coming out, and that's just not true. And I think that's what we see from, gay men in Kentucky, in the southern states, that it's not all bad once you come out. Like your right. Families sometimes will come around, even if they do come from that Baptist or missionary Baptist background. So I want to see more media portrayals of that, to where it's not all gray clouds everywhere. There is some sunshine out there for us too.
And that takes time. And
right.
that's part of that story too, I think. Because it's easy to create a story about an angry queer father, or a father of a queer kid who's angry. And that's a very easy narrative to put in a 30-minute episodic TV show. But there's a much broader story with a lot of people that I agree should be told.
3 do's and don'ts. 3 do's and don'ts.
My 3 do's would be to take risks and go for it. And just, I have decided for years that I wrote a show and I want to produce it. So how do I do it? And never let myself say, oh, well, it might be really hard, or I'm not sure it's going to be successful, so I don't want to try. So take big swings, and sometimes you miss, and that's great because you learn so much when you do. But you'll never learn if you don't try to take those big risks. And along in that same vein, try to have fun and not take things too seriously. I try to teach myself this because it's so easy to get yourself wrapped up around, a bad decision or a mistake or these things. And you have to learn to forgive yourself. And a friend recently told me, is when something's consuming my mind, I try to ask myself, will I care about this in 6 months? And if the answer is yes, then I maybe need to do some work on it. If it's no, then I should let it go, because it's not worth you only have so much time on this planet, and you spend a lot of it consuming yourself with worry and doubt, and you're not really enjoying life. So that's the second one. And then the third is definitely to prioritize physical and mental health. I feel like in my 20s, I was not doing that as a young queer person. And just to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and that you're, taking care of your teeth and your whole body and the whole package, because you've only got one body your whole life. So to a young queer person, go get your dental cleans every 6 months. Make sure you're getting your HIV test, whenever you're scheduled to, every 6 months or 3 months with your PrEP. Just take care of yourself, and don't be ashamed of talking to medical professionals about your body. That was definitely something in my early 20s where I would just it took me a long time to find the right doctor who I didn't feel ashamed saying, yes, I had sex with X amount of men since I last saw you, because that's the actual information they need. And yes, I was this and they were about, you know what I mean? Like, these are all things that it's part of your sexual health. It's called sexual health because you need to take care of yourself. So those are my 3 do's. Don'ts is don't be afraid to play with gender. Put on a pair of heels, even if you only get in drag, even if you only do it once. Right, Kurtis?
one time was enough.
But now you did it, and you own that, and that's a great experience, even if your feet hurt a lot the next morning.
Yeah, my whole legs were just aching the whole next day. So
that first day in heels,
I don't envy them
over time.
I don't envy them at all. They are far braver than me. So
when I did my shows in Chicago, I usually would only do it when I had to fill in, like if someone had to drop out of the show or didn't show up or whatever. But I definitely got used to moving around in heels, so I'm pretty good with heels. And I think I had 2 more. So the don'ts: don't let anyone else define you. I think we were kind of bleeds back to what we were talking about earlier. Is like you're going to be the person you're going to be, and you can choose who you want to please and who you don't. And if that's a painful decision, sometimes you got to own it, because you can't be beholden to anyone else's ideal of the person you're going to be. And the third one is, which I think it kind of harkens back to where we were talking to, is don't forget where you came from. I'm from Louisville. I moved away for 20 years, and I was blessed with a really amazing family, extended family, so much love, and it's important to not, even if someone pisses you off, even if your father says something that makes you want to never come back to your home, don't lose sight of the bigger place where you came from, because if you're lucky, there's a lot of love there. It just might be hard to work through getting it. So just, don't give up on people. Try to give people, a second chance or a third if they have to, because, it's real easy to be like, you need to love me because I'm this queer person, but you also have to be a little, hopefully less now than 20 years ago, but you have to be open to the fact that people take time. For myself, I didn't understand. If you would have asked me 15 years ago what I thought about trans people, I wasn't informed or knowledgeable enough to have accurate opinions or truly know what it even meant. You know what I mean? So I think it takes time for people, including people in the queer culture, but also a family, to learn and grow. And if people are willing to, you got to give them the chance to. If they're not willing to, you got no time for people like that. But if you can see some potential for growth, it's, I think, a better choice to try than not.
It was something my mom said whenever I came out, and, I just expected this overnight adaptation to her knowing my culture, her knowing gay culture, and knowing the words and all this kind of stuff. And she finally had to tell me, she's like, look, you've had 20 years to come to terms with this and to learn. She's like, I've had 20 minutes, it feels like. So, it does take time to learn the lingo, to learn, that gay culture is very different than what some people might experience in a rural area. So I definitely agree. And you make another good point in terms of, even if, say, your family's not accepting, that doesn't mean that there isn't enough love in your community to accept you. I think that's such an important thing for rural kids out there. That there's people that would support you that you would not expect to be supportive of you,
Right.
Once you come out and go back to that community. So I've always found that amazing to see.
I think it's really important for young queer people to try to find your tribe and know that you might fail. Because even though we are all one LGBTQIA community, not everyone gets along anywhere in the world. So, and not all the same type of people want to be around each other. So if you feel like you're getting locked into a tribe that isn't really you, break out of it sooner than later to try to find the right group of people that is for you. Because I know, there's definitely been times in my life where I was like, oh, I'm in this group of people and they accept me being here, but do I really like being here? And do they really like me being here? And like, it's okay if you're like, I'm going to try a different group of people for a few months, and you have to make those decisions for yourself. And they might come with not so wonderful conversations when the other friends are like, hey, why don't you hang out with us anymore? And you're like, because I like these people more. And
I think that's true. I mean, we hear of toxic relationships, that's also true in friendships and little friend cliques and groups. And
absolutely,
sometimes it is important to kind of step out of the mold. I think it's important to step out of the mold, even if you love your friend group and your clique. So just to experience new people and meet new people. So I think those are all great do's and don'ts. Let's jump into our heap of trouble segment.
In the early 2000s, there was, before Grindr or Scruff, there was an app called, and it still exists, but this was like the only one they had at the time. It was Manhunt. And in Chicago, like it was, you were on your laptop. This wasn't a mobile thing. Like you were like searching people who had entered their zip code. And like, this is how before we had Grindr and Scruff kids, you used like your GPS location. So talking to this guy in Manhunt, pretty cute guy. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to go hang out with you. And then this other guy starts messaging me. I'm like, oh, he's cuter. It's like, I want to hook up with him instead. So I totally like tell first guy, I'm like, hey, I don't think I can hook up tonight or hang out tonight. Something came up. So I tell Jake, who's still my friend now many years later, ironically, but I tell Jake, I was like, who was the other guy who was the cuter guy. I was like, hey, can I come over? I want to hang out. And he's like, yeah, come over. So I get to the apartment, I knock on the door, and who answers the door but the first guy, because they are roommates. And I am just like so embarrassed. He's like, oh, Jake told me that you were coming over. And I was like, oh my God. So then we like go in and sit for a few minutes, and like Jake's like, do you want to go to my bedroom? I was like, sure.
Yeah, so whatever gets me out of this living room situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that, that was why I'd come there. It's kind of ironic. I'm actually like, this is kind of the fun part of queer culture. Like, because of that, random hookup, I became friends with Jake. I cast him in a show a couple of years later. He's remained good friends with me. Mike, his roommate, I still talk to. He lives in Vegas. I've seen him a couple times when I go out there for work. So it's kind of funny, like, if you don't let little things like that bother you, you can actually find some cool friendships out of it. And they're both really great guys. So, but it was, I'll never forget the feeling when I opened that or he opened that door and I was like, oh, okay, it's you.
I think that is a very good thing to teach rural LGBTQ kids is we all end up rooming together. So there's a high likelihood that this could happen to you in the future. So maybe pick different nights at least.
Right. Or make sure that on your grid now that you can see how far people are away, make sure people are separated by a couple 100 feet at least.
Yeah. I also love that. It's we all tell our age based on our social apps that we use. And the bars that existed whenever we first started coming out, like those two things are always like what separates the generation. So let's go ahead and enter our last segment. Sure. Our pot of gold question.
I was thinking so when are we getting you back in drag?
We're not getting back in drag. I literally that night I gave everything to Leah, and I said, "This is all yours now." So I had never done full on drag like that night. So Hunks and Pumps, I actually did full on drag for the first time. I have a whole new respect for drag queens. The amount of effort that goes into those numbers is unbelievable. So,
yeah, for those listening, if you could have, I've seen Kurtis has been smiling on this video the whole time we've been doing this podcast, but that night he was not smiling, folks.
I was not. I was. I think if there were 12 of us back there, and I think 11 of us, it's like the most nervous we've ever been. So I've given speeches in front of thousands of people, and I don't get nervous. But that night I was definitely nervous.
You looked phenomenal, honey. So,
Well, thank you.
I won't be waiting for your next audition though for Drag Daddy.
Yeah, it would. As I told Leah, it said it would have to be for some charity that I would just truly, truly believe in. And she's like, "Well, this is for LGBTQ homeless," and I was like, "You would pick my heartstring,
Right.
I was like, all right, so it would take a lot to get me back in drag. I will never say never, because that's what I think Justin Bieber taught me when I was growing up, right? So, well, on that note, let's ask you this question. What is your most embarrassing moment of being a part of theater?
My most embarrassing moment in theater was when we were doing Snow White and the Seven Drag Queens back in Chicago. After every show, we did this thing called the Ever After Show, and it would be different themed every week. And basically that was just like a drag review after the scripted play. So one night we were doing a best of Disney songs night. And my dear friend Omika was doing The Circle of Life. And we were all dressed in these weird animal prints and whatnot. And I had these two very large branches, and I was carrying them in and shaking them like trees and kind of doing them around her. And I slipped on the floor because someone had spilled a drink or something. And I go flying up, I hit the ground, but my little trees stay up in the air. And everyone looks at me, and I'm just lying on the floor, and I just start shaking them in the air. I'm like, I'm okay. The tree's fine.
Oh my goodness, that's awesome.
Yeah, I was so embarrassed. I was like, I didn't know what to do, so I just started shaking the branches. I was like, well, we'll just say it's part of the show.
Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm still
okay, right.
Yeah. I always love embarrassing theater moments. I've had a lot growing up. And then it seems like every drag queen or male entertainer, they've all got their pee story, where they peed on stage. They've all done it. So,
or had to rip. I remember I've had to definitely rip, some pants off because I was like, I'm going to lose it. So
totally get it. All right. Well, with that, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. Everybody, if you can, go out December 2nd through the 5th to see Hedwig at Play Louisville, and that show starts at 7:30. So thank you again so much for being on the show.
It was a blast. Thanks so much, Kurtis.
Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Don't forget to come on back now. I know we all love a little vibration, so if you are not already, go ahead and subscribe to this podcast. And we will surprise you on occasion with a new release vibration in your pocket. But in the meantime, if you find yourself alone or crossing new horizons along the rainbow trail, and you need a friend or even a laugh to get you through those dark and stormy nights, holler on out to us at www.weatheringrainbows.com, where you can find shelter in the blogs, videos, and other episodes that will hopefully keep you out of a whole heap of trouble. So until next time, y'all, giddy up, be true to yourself, and make the best of life. And wherever the wild tracks may lead you, may the rainbow always touch your shoulder.